past week hasn't been much different than the one that we showed in our last episode. It almost feels like we're stuck in a Groundhog Day kind of cycle of working on the bottom. After we got our first coat of our filler on there of the Volcano micro balloons, whatever they're called, I'll try and find the right name. We did go through and start sanding that down, but because of the different stages we were working on, initially getting just the primer and the barrier coat on, it was a while before we had the whole boat covered with the barrier coat and the fairing. So we spent a few days, the both of us, going through and smoothing down the fairing compound as much as we could. Again, we're not trying to get it perfect, we're just trying to make it so that where the welded seams are, the ones that we've had done ourselves and the existing ones from when the boat was built, doesn't have the rough edges for when we go to clean the bottom. So we just kind of worked on that between hand sanding and also with our palm sander and our orbital sander to go through and get as much of a smooth surface as we could. Matt went through after that and applied a second coat of the filler. So we usually try and do that in the afternoon to give it time to set overnight, which means the next morning we can work on sanding it down again. But I think we're starting to realize how big the haul is because basically one application of the fairing compound and both of us working to sand it down to a degree that we find okay is still about 2 days. So because this is the first, 2 rounds of filler that we've been on so far, we're not at the point where we can smooth it out to the surface that we'll want to be at. It's mostly just kind of smoothing down the surface to make it as even as possible, and there's going to be little gaps and indents, which we'll go through on the next round, so the second round of filler was a lot better for that. There's been a lot of sanding through to bare metal, as careful as we try and be with our sanding, and in some points we just know it's going to happen, so we just go kind of hardcore with the sanding and know that we're going to have to paint over those areas again. At the end of each round of sanding down the fairing compound, we have to go through and cover the bare metal again, which then after that point means that we're ready for the next round of filler. So once all the bare metal is covered after we've already done our sanding, we just add the next layer and start the process all over again. Are you awake now?
No.
Not really.
Not really.
Today is a very special day in mine and Matt's lives. It is our 17-year dating anniversary. And since we started dating at 17 years old, it's our Half-life-iversary because it means that we have now spent half of our lives together as a couple. And we actually have been looking forward to this day for a really long time. And
we don't normally celebrate our dating anniversary. Yeah.
But this is a pretty significant one.
Yeah. Since we've been together for half our lives.
Half our lives.
Yeah,
and
of course,
we thought we'd be in the Caribbean right now. We thought we'd at least be in the Bahamas right now, going to get some
water,
conch fritters or something. But we're here in the yard in Indiantown, and not only that, but a terrible cold front has come through again. So it's raining outside right now, and it's 50 degrees.
Yeah, it's cold, rainy. Actually, right now it's icy blue skies.
So at 5:30 at night, we can, go salvage just a minute of it.
Yeah. No.
So we spent our Half-life-iversary sitting in bed, drinking coffee, watching marathons on TV. So that's kind of how our life seems to go when these big milestones come.
Yeah. Our 10-year, we run out of
10-year wedding anniversary.
Yes.
Our credit cards were shut down on the Canary Islands, and we just spent the last of our cash on non-perishable provisions. So we ate Kraft macaroni and cheese on the boat.
Yep. So we spend 3 months out of the U.S. or 4 months out of the U.S. and all of a sudden we get to the Canary Islands, and they think that we're thieves and we stolen the credit cards,
because
and so they shut it down.
We tell them all the time that don't be surprised if we're spending money in Portugal, don't be surprised if we're spending money in Spain.
Yeah.
We tried to buy some batteries for the boat and it was suspicious.
Yep. So they shut us down, so all we had left was enough cash for macaroni. Oh no, we had macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, we couldn't even buy any. We found some on the boat, our last box.
Yep. So that's what we had for our 10-year wedding anniversary, where we actually were going to go out and celebrate.
But at least we could like walk around, the nice city there and walk the beach there. And today we're stuck on a rainy boat in the boatyard in Indiantown, Florida.
Yep. So that's good.
We've got Burger King to look forward to for dinner.
Yeah, it's gonna be dinner. We could go out, but we just don't feel like it now.
We've come too far into the laziness of the day.
Yeah. It took about a 2-hour nap, 3-hour nap, something like that.
No motivation.
Yeah.
So, but maybe we'll do a champagne toast later. I got some Prosecco. So, at least there's that.
There's that.
Thank you. Romantic dinner for two. So yeah, 17 years together. Something special for the night, so.
Freezing cold.
Yes. Trying very, very hard to stay warm here in this metal boat that's, yeah, it'll be better when we get our diesel heater eventually.
Yeah. Apparently the insulation isn't working.
Not yet.
Because I'm pretty sure it's warmer outside than it is inside here. It's just holding in the cold.
Yeah. Cheers to 17 years together, my love.
Yay!
I would have a glass too instead of the bottle, but I can't hold the camera and a glass and a bottle.
Then that's your size drink.
It is my size drink. If you're like us, you might buy a project boat that you work on forever and ever, and it feels like you're never getting anything done on it, and it is a never-ending project. But then your neighbor shows up with this, and suddenly you feel a lot better about yourself. Between that, we did have a chance to actually finish up our hard Dodger as far as getting everything painted. Sorry, I had to switch to the car because it was just getting a little too noisy out there with airplane practice going on and lawnmowers and cars. So back to the Dodger. Matt had been doing the coats of primer on that, which you had seen a couple of episodes ago. And then it was time to move on to the top coat, which is the same paint that we've been using on our boat for all of the areas that don't have the non-skid. That is the Petit 2-part Easy Epoxy, and it's a 4-to-1 ratio of paint to hardener. And then we normally add a couple of capfuls of thinner to it and roller to roll that out. The only problem we found with this, and we kind of wish we weren't using it anymore, except for we just have so much that we can't justify going to all grip or something when we still have enough to finish what we need, even if it's not what we want, is that it goes on really thin, so we end up needing about 5 or 6 coats just to cover the surface enough that you can't see what's below it. So there were a lot of occasions of putting a coat on and then waiting for it to dry, the next day going through and doing a light wet sand to it. It needs at least a scuff sand before you can put the next coat on, plus with the heat that we'd been having at the time, it would dry a little faster than we wanted it to. So it would cause just like little bits of bubbles or roughness that I couldn't get out with the roller, and even though we dry rolled after it. So just getting what's the lower part of the hard Dodger, or the part that we're going to see from beneath when we're sitting in the cockpit. We were thinking that 4 layers was going to be good enough, but then we'd run into issues like the day was too hot, so I'd wait until later in the afternoon, as late as I could, to do a coat of it. And then we realized that the dew for the evening set so early, because we were within that weird winter springtime here where it goes from like really hot to fairly cold and moist within just a few hours. So we get up the next morning and all of the shine would be gone. So then that required another scuff sanding and yet another layer of paint. And then also through the winter in the area that we're in, there's tons of sugarcane fields that surround us. And so almost every day they're burning crops within like a mile or two of us. Will send up these huge clouds of smoke into the air with all this dust and little bits of ash, and depending on what way the wind is blowing, it will blow right over to us and just deposit itself where we're painting. So there was a couple of cases where we were ready to paint, the Dodger was ready to go, and then we'd see one of these clouds in the distance, and then a few minutes later ash would start raining down. So not good days for painting, but eventually we were able to get all of the coats on, at least enough that we were willing to put on. So that meant we were ready for the non-skid on the top part. We're not doing that for us. We don't plan to walk on it. In the end, it will probably be stable enough to maybe have meat sit or lean on it. But mostly we're doing that because we know that our cat is going to at some point climb up there. She climbs everywhere. We've learned from having that paint on our deck is when it is wet, it's incredibly slick. And so the height of it and the angle, and she's up there, and if it's wet at all, she's just going to slide right off the boat and into the water, which we don't want. And, you know, during anchor times, we kind of let her have the run of the boat. So we figured just precaution, and it allows Matt to have to spend less time fairing, which now that we're doing that on the bottom, I think he would go absolutely insane if he had to perfectly fair the top of that Dodger. So adding that coat of non-skid was just an all-around win for us. So what we did is measured out about 1.5 inches from the edge. I would just do little pieces of like a marking tape just to mark the edge of the measurement with the blue tape, the blue painter's tape. And then we use this orange 3mm fine line tape. I spent half a morning taping that up. After lunch, we went through and added the non-skid. We can see in video 3 when we added it to our whole deck if you're interested in the process. So we did that, and I think you can kind of say the Dodger is done now. Finally, we put it back up in place, and it looks really nice except for the mess of the cockpit, which we're hoping to get to really soon. Just need to get those barrels out first, which it's waiting on something else. So that's what we've been working on the past week. Again, it's pretty much just a repeat of what we did in the last episode, but these projects take forever, so don't worry, there's more interesting things coming in the next episode. And I know in the last episode we promised you that I'd get into fuel systems, but Matt literally hasn't touched it at all since we did that narration, so I'm just going to wait and hold off on that until we have it covered more, so that way you're seeing what he did versus just our theories of what we hope to or plan to do. So we'll cover that in a future episode as soon as he figures it out, so it might still be a few away, but yeah, just lots more bottom work, a little bit of Dodger work thrown in there, our anniversary, and that kind of concludes the past week in our lives. So yeah, it's a little boring, and we're still looking forward to getting out this summer, hopefully. Join us on our next episode as we travel to West Palm Beach to meet up with our new friends Courtney and Jeremy and spend a day sailing their boat, our first time out on the water in 1.5 years.